Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas tardes. Antes de analizar el mercado americano y también el mexicano, vamos a hablar del PMI manufacturero. Marta y Ser, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes, cuéntanos.
Muy buenas tardes, Manu. Vamos a poner el foco en los detalles. Vamos a intentar desgranar el último dato del PMI manufacturero que conocíamos en Estados Unidos la semana pasada, y lo vamos a hacer además con el jefe del ISM, de este indicador macroeconómico tan importante para conocer el sector manufacturero estadounidense, para calibrar su estado de salud, y además aprovecharemos también la ocasión para preguntarle por sus propias expectativas respecto a la inflación. Esta semana vamos a conocer el dato de IPC en Estados Unidos y también la posible actuación de la Reserva Federal la semana que viene. Es un placer saludar a Timothy Fiore, es chair, como decimos, jefe del ISM Manufacturing PMI. Timothy, thank you so much for having us a few minutes.
Thanks for having me back. Appreciate you inviting me back. So I'm the chair of the Manufacturing Business Survey Committee for the United States. We have a panelist of companies that's been around for a long time, very large panel. I receive their data and their comments, and I look and I come up with an analysis of what happened in the prior month, and I've reported out on the first working day of the following month. So thanks for having me. If you could go to the next slide, slide 2, what I'd like to talk about today is that many people don't fully understand what makes up the PMI. And so I think I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about the elements of the PMI and the sub-indexes. And then I'll give you an understanding of my perspective of what happened in the month of May. It was a very dynamic month. Is that good?
Perfect. And this month of May, we see how economic activity in the manufacturing sector grew, with the overall economy achieving 24th consecutive month of growth. The May manufacturing PMI, Timothy, registered 56.1. It's an increase from the previous reading. If we look closer at details, what did this data tell us?
Okay, why don't you go to slide 4, the graph that says manufacturing PMI 2000 to 2022. So this is a depiction of the PMI for the last 20 years. And what you can see is that we've had 6 manufacturing expansion cycles over the last 20 years. And on the right-hand side of the slide is the current expansion. The colored blue shows the period of time that the PMI was over 60. So you can see, compared to all the other prior expansion cycles, we spent the most time over 60 in this cycle than any other in the last 5 cycles. We're currently at 56.1 for the month of May. We rebounded a little bit from a slightly lower number in the month of April. And let me talk with you about that. So if you can go to slide 5, this is the table at a glance. That it's like the money slide, the summary slide of everything that's in the PMI report. You can access that report at ismworld.org every month. But what I do is there's 10 sub-indexes here. 5 of them make up the PMI number. The other 5 support it. So what this chart shows you is that it shows you the index, new orders, production, employment, so forth. It shows you the numbers for May in that column just to the right of the left column. It shows you the numbers for April. It shows you the percentage point change month to month, April to May. It shows you the direction, meaning is it over 50 or under 50. It shows you the rate of change, meaning that is a number this month higher or lower than the prior month. And then it shows you the trend. And you can see, as you mentioned, Maria, it's a 24-month trend of manufacturing expansion. Generally, if you look at the other 5 expansion cycles over the last 20 years, we've averaged about 34 months. We think that this expansion will go longer than that, assuming that the Federal Reserve doesn't do anything very, very seriously on the interest rate side, and assuming that energy markets stay at an affordable level. Because we've had a supplier-constrained expansion here, we believe we haven't really been able to peak to the extent that we normally do peak, and therefore this cycle will probably run longer than 34, hopefully in the 40 to 42 months. So why don't you go to page 6, because this is the chart that I use to analyze the PMI numbers. So I have 2 elements. I have the numbers, as I mentioned. I have the comments, and I have thousands of comments. And I go through the comments, and I try to put them into groupings that are meaningful to our conversation. And I'll talk a little bit on the right-hand side. You can see what I do with some of the comments. So we're definitely still in a demand-driven expansion with supplier constraints. The suppliers are still the single biggest roadblock to us being able to meet our peak consumption output side. And majority of the reason for that is really labor at all levels of the supply chain. But there was some concern in the month of April about sagging demand. We did have 5-to-1 positive to cautious sentiment demand in May compared to April, which was up from a 3-to-1 in April. So demand absolutely came back. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We are having hiring issues, but in the month of May, hiring got a little bit easier, but we're having a lot of trouble with turnover. We have a lot of people quitting and moving on to new jobs, and our panelists just have not been able to make the headway on employment, on headcount expansion on the factory floor that they really would like. We had 36% of the hiring comments noting that high level of turnover, down slightly from 39% in the month of April. And in addition to all that, we had 33% of our comments noted price increases at the general headline comment level, and that was down from 42% in April, which indicates a little that we may see some easing. So as I mentioned, I take the 10 sub-indexes and I put them into 3 groups: demand, the fuchsia color, consumption, the blue color, and inputs, the green color. And when I'm able to put all them together, it makes a lot more sense for me. So let's talk about demand first. We have good new order level in the month of May, better than the month of April. You can see we're up 1.6 points. New export orders are very sluggish still, primarily because of the unrest in Europe and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, as well as China being shut down for the better part of 2 months. So you can't rely on our new export orders, our trading partners, to really feed the factories in the US for export. So maybe that will loosen up in the future, but right now it's an issue. Our customer inventory levels remain way too low. Remember, over 50 means that they're expanding, under 50 means they're contracting, and a 32.7 number of customer inventories really means that our customers have empty shelves all through their operations. And then finally, the backlog number, which I really like to see high at the end of the month at 58.7, is a strong backlog number. Last year we did run 63, 64. We're down to the high 50s. That's still a very good number. You can see we've had 23 months of expansion on that. So demand is very good, I guess, is my point here. There was no real indication of any easing. We did have some comments from several industry sectors that are starting to see a slowing of intake orders. But, we're sitting at record lead times. We've been at record lead times now for 3 or 4 months, and we're still sitting at record prices. And there's no real surprise that we are seeing some slowing of orders way out, beyond normal production demand. And those slowings really were occurring in the building products area, and fabricated metal products, the chemical area that feeds a lot of manufacturing materials, especially building products too, as well as non-woven materials. So we'll see what the month of June brings, but demand still remains very strong. So let me stop there for a second, Maria, so do you have any questions?
It's taking into account or taking a closer look at these 3 main groups, demand, consumption, and inputs that contains the 10 sub-indexes is really important. But I would like to know more details about how do you calculate the index, about what makes the ISM PMI different?
Good, okay. If you can go back up to slide 3, I can walk you through what makes a PMI different. So on the left-hand slide of the chart, we have 5 of the sub-indexes that go into the PMI: new orders, production, employment, supplier deliveries, and inventories. We have 5 other indexes that support those other 5: customer inventories, as I've just spoke about on the demand side; prices, which is an input element; backlog, which is a demand element; new export orders, a demand element; and imports, which is an input element. So we have 10 sub-indexes. 5 of them go into the PMI number. They each go in with equal weight. So new orders is 20%, production is 20%, and so forth. We don't weigh one more than the other, and we've been doing that for a very long time. Remember, 50, above 50 is expanding, below 50 is contracting. And we ask the simple questions: are things better this month? Are things the same this month? Are things slower this month? So if everybody reported that things are better this month, then we'd have a PMI of 100. If everyone reported that things are slower this month, we'd have a PMI of 0. If everybody reported that the PMI was the same this month, we'd have a PMI of 50. So when you report the same, we take half the value. The PMI generally operates in a 25-point range, unless there's some really unusual events that occur. So you can kind of think that 2.5 points is about a 10% shift month to month. We do measure activity month over month. So we evaluate May against April and so forth. It's not a holistic long-term look. It's what happened month to month. We seasonally adjust the new order number, the production number, the employment number, and the inventories number. But you could easily argue right now, post-pandemic, that we don't really have much of a season besides the holiday season. So some of those more predictive numbers, like new orders that are for the future, since we have extremely long lead times, the seasonal adjustment factors probably are having trouble keeping up with it. But that being said, I'm a believer of the seasonal adjustment factors under normal circumstances. But in today's environment, you really have to look a little bit deeper. As I mentioned, each of the sub-indexes carries the same weight. We also we have 18 manufacturing industry sectors that make up U.S. manufacturing. Each one has a different percent participation in the U.S. manufacturing environment. For instance, our number one sector is computers and electronic products. That's worth about 15% manufacturing GDP. So we weight that industry grouping 15% of GDP and so on. We have others that are 1%, 2%. They only impact the PMI by 1 or 2%. So we do weigh it by industry. And the report is issued on the first working day of the following month. We do that religiously. The panel is all made up of supply management professionals. We don't recruit people outside of supply management. There are people who are in the middle of capital acquisition plans, raw material receipts, business planning, obviously pricing structures, hiring, and so forth. So we feel that we have a kind of a unique position here in the business to be able to report reliably. And we established this report in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Commerce way back in the 30s. In the late 40s, we converted what was a journal entry PMI to a numbers-driven PMI, and that's where we are today.
Timothy,
any questions on that?
Yes, one question, sorry, about, well, in terms of monetary policy, at this moment, investors are watching economic data, the PMI manufacturing, but also all the evolution in labor market. And last week we had a better than expected US non-farm job report, and now investors are watching this economic data closely for clues about the Fed's path for raising interest rates. How do you think with all of this macro data could act Powell next week?
Okay, well, I can't speak for the Federal Reserve, but I can tell you what the manufacturing panel is feeling. If you go to slide 7, fundamentally, we still have issues around labor participation. We're at record unemployment. We don't have enough people reporting into the workforce, but probably the most significant issue today is that we have too many people quitting. And I'll show you quitting and going on to another job. And I'll show you some of the numbers on that. But just to finish up on the demand side, here's our percent of comments on the green, that's no comments about positive demand. On the right-hand side, the red are comments about concerns about future demand. So demand is not an issue at present outside of longer term here, the building trade side getting softened up because of the increase in interest rates that everybody knows is coming. The question is, when will it come? And it's hard to think that it would come in any fast way this year. But if you go to slide 8, this is a summary on the labor comments. So I look at the hire to fire ratio, which is how many of my panelists are looking to hire and how many are looking to reduce their headcount either through layoffs or attrition. And you can see that we've strongly positive hire, 10 to 1 in May, 20 to 1 in April. We're still looking to hire. We haven't had a number less than 6 to 1 back in January, and that was really the Omicron COVID rollout. The right-hand side chart shows you that the difficulty that the panelist companies are having in hiring. You can see in May it got a little bit easier, not much, but a little bit. We still have a long ways to go. The biggest issue is primarily the quits level on the bottom left-hand side. We had a slight easing in May compared to April. It's probably because we're entering the vacation period. But I think that number probably will not slow down until wage rates stabilize, and we haven't really seen the wage rates stabilize yet. But the panelists on the bottom right-hand side did report that over 7% of, we felt that we had 7% improvement compared to the month of April, where we had only 1%. Still off of the 11 and 12% that we had in January and February and March, but nonetheless some improvement. And hopefully, we'll be able to make some headway on the factory floor. We've got teachers coming out of school now. We have high school graduates graduating. We have college kids graduating. That should help somewhat in the labor pool. But fundamentally, the biggest problem remains that we cannot get enough people on the factory floor. And now we have, with such amount of turnover, now we have a productivity issue on the factory floor too. Where you used to have skilled and trained technicians on the factory floor, you probably have 10 to 15% on that floor now that are not as skilled and trained as they historically have been in the past. And that will be an ongoing issue for manufacturing, as well as potential quality issues because of that lack of training. So any questions?
No, that's perfect, Timothy. Thank you so much. We will see how all this sentiment evolves, and especially the labor market in the middle of the great resignation crisis. We will are seeing it too in Spain and in Europe. Thank you so much, Timothy, from the ISM chair of the ISM Manufacturing PMI. We will talk next month about more data, and we will see how this index evolves in June. Thank you so much.
That's good. Thanks very much.